Hey guys, tonight we're walking through a world where time doesn't tick, it smolders, softly, sweetly, and just a little mysteriously. There are no clocks here, no numbers glowing on your bedside table, no frantic alarms. Instead, time drifts by on curls of scented smoke. Imagine measuring your day not by seconds or minutes, but by how long a strand of sandalwood takes to burn. Or when the air changes from spiced myrrh to cooling rose. This was real. This was time, ancient Persian style. You probably wouldn't survive it, honestly. Not unless you've got the patience of a desert tortoise and a nose fine-tuned like a perfumer's apprentice. But tonight, you don't have to. You just get to float through it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I love knowing where you're tuning in from. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I read every one. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a stone path, barefoot, feeling the cool breath of morning ripple across the dry garden soil. You're in Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, and the sky has just begun to warm. That dusty pink that only ancient desert mornings seem to understand. Palm fronds shiver in the lightest breeze. Bees, lazy from the chill, hum like sleepy monks among the flowering citrus trees. And somewhere behind a carved limestone wall, a priest is lighting the morning incense. It's the first signal of the day. A small brazier glows with soft flame, nestled on a tripod of hammered bronze. The scent is instant, unmistakable. Sandalwood, crisp and dry at first, then deeper, earthy, almost sweet. The smoke rises in a slow, disciplined column, trained by the windless stillness of dawn. This isn't just perfume. This is a clock. Or at least something trying its very best to be one. You sit cross-legged in the grass as more smoke begins to bloom. The gardener tending a row of herbs glances up at the first plume and nods. He'll start pruning in 10 minutes. That's how long this bundle takes to burn. This is how it works. In the world of ancient Persia, especially in its religious and royal centers, fragrant smoke didn't just smell nice. It divided the day into prayers, into tasks, into rhythms that matched the movements of the sun, or when that failed, the fragrance of cinnamon. The Achaemenids were no fools. They had sundials, water clocks, and all manner of calibrated pottery. But those things couldn't always be used inside temples, or at night, or on cloudy days when the sky sulked in bronze silence. But a slow-burning bundle of carefully blended incense, that worked. Especially if you had a system. And they did. The Zoroastrian priests, keepers of both the fire and the flame's meaning, lit incense not just for worship, but to mark sacred intervals. Morning prayers might begin at the lighting of the sandalwood. Midday was announced by cinnamon or dried orange peel. At sunset, something darker, myrrh perhaps, or resinous frankincense, would smolder along the temple rafters. You didn't need to be watching the sun. You just had to smell the change. Historians still argue whether this method was standardized. Were there scrolls of official scent schedules? Or was it more intuitive, passed down like a family stew recipe, measured in pinches and prayer? No one's entirely sure. But temple ruins across Iran, particularly at Nakhshe-Rostam and Takhti Soleiman, reveal intricate stone niches and ventilation chimneys perfect for managing indoor smoke. You don't carve a smoke tunnel unless that smoke matters. And here's the fun bit. This wasn't just about accuracy, it was about experience. The Persians didn't slice time into sterile units, they infused it, gave it character. A time of day could be described not by a number, but by scent. Come see me after cinnamon. Leave before the cedar fades. Imagine if your calendar app smelled like nutmeg every Tuesday. Of course, there were practical benefits. You could train someone to tell you when a task had run long, not with a sundial, but with a nose. The clove has burned through. He's late for audience. Or the amber hasn't even reached the base yet. You've still got time to rewrite that inscription. But it wasn't all priests and protocol. Even here in this early garden of morning, you notice something poetic. The way the smoke glows gold in the rising sun, then shifts to ghostly blue when it brushes against shadow. The way a breeze pulls it sideways, signaling time not just as scent, but as movement. Even the pigeons seem to understand. They wait until the first curl of smoke before beginning their feather-puffing coo chorus. And somewhere, not far away, a young noble rubs his eyes, yawns, and stretches out his arm toward a window. He doesn't need to look at the sky to know the hour. He smells the sandalwood and knows it's time to dress, just as you do. But don't rush. This is slow time. This is time that whispers, that wins, that drifts gently from chamber to chamber, like it's trying not to wake the empire too suddenly. You rise, the scent still curling in the air, and step through the colonnade where light and smoke and history intertwine. You've just begun a day where the hours aren't numbered. They're blended like perfume, measured in flame, marked by air. And the clock? It's burning softly at your side. The sandalwood has nearly burned through now. Its scent is lighter, ghost-like. You follow it as it coils through a low corridor, slipping past stone columns etched with lotus blossoms and winged bulls. The temple is waking, not with bells, not with gongs, but with the language of smoke. You step softly into the fire temple, the sacred heart of Zoroastrian practice. It's quieter than you expect. Cool stone underfoot, whitewashed walls holding shadows like secrets. In the center, protected by a low wall of carved alabaster, the sacred flame flickers, steady, small, impossibly alive. Beside it stands the mobed, the priest. His robes are white, his cap starched, and his hands move with the same fluidity as the rising smoke. He's preparing the first blend of the day, not just for offering, but for timekeeping. A small brass box opens with a click. Inside, powdered cinnamon bark, a few crumbles of dried rose, and a sprinkling of crushed pine resin. He mixes it slowly, not measuring by weight, but by feel. This batch will burn for one ga, about the length of a sacred prayer cycle. The Zoroastrian calendar divided days into 5 gas, each with its own prayers and rules, and each, when indoors or cloaked by clouds, marked not by sundials, but by the aroma in the air. You sit cross-legged on a cushion near the wall, watching as he places the blend into a shallow clay bowl atop a long iron trivet. A coal from the eternal flame is dropped into the center. The incense flares once, just a spark, and then settles into a thick ribbon of scent. Cinnamon first, then rose, then something ancient and piney, like the memory of a forest you never walked through. The mobed begins to chant. You don't understand the words, but you feel them. Slow syllables, measured breath, each phrase drawn to match the length of a smoke coil as it rises, vanishes, reappears. It's like singing in time with the wind. That's the trick. The incense doesn't just measure time, it sets the pace. The mobed isn't trying to finish a prayer within a time block. He's synchronizing his body, his rhythm, to the burning incense itself. He chants until the scent changes. He bows when the last wisp curls into nothing. And just like that, the first ga of the day ends. This system isn't just devotional, it's practical. The temples ran on schedules. Offerings at dawn, consultations in the second ga, ablutions in the third. When the smoke changed, everyone adjusted. Temple staff would light secondary incense in different chambers so that each part of the building could follow the day together, even when separated by thick stone walls. Of course, the scent blends weren't random. They were carefully composed. Some temples used regional ingredients, cardamom in the south, juniper berries in the mountains, even powdered citrus peel by the coast. The blends became so recognizable that devotees could tell the hour by breath alone. Historians still argue whether these blends were standardized across the empire or more locally improvised. Some scrolls reference first Ga powder and third Ga blend, but none offer exact recipes, which honestly makes sense. If you've ever asked two family members for the same cookie recipe, you already know how this goes. One Mobed's sandalwood is another's cinnamon. As long as the burn rate was right and the transitions clear, the day flowed. There's something beautifully fragile about it. Unlike a sundial carved in stone or a water clock that ticks no matter who watches, a smoke clock requires presence. You have to notice. You have to care. Or you miss it entirely. No alarms, no chimes, just scent, shifting, fading, and returning as something new. The Mobed steps away, and an apprentice takes his place. Same robe, smaller hands. He looks nervous, like he's about to perform in front of a very judgmental incense stick. You watch as he pinches a blend, this one redder, probably with safflower or crushed myrtle, and places it into a fresh burner, a second coal, a second bloom of scent. Not as smooth, a little smoky, but the ritual continues. He begins to chant. His voice wavers. The rhythm skips. He forgets a phrase and mutters it twice. But no one stops him. The smoke keeps rising. So he keeps going. Time moves forward, even when you don't feel ready. A gust of wind slips through a high clerestory window. For a moment, the smoke swirls too fast. The apprentice pauses, uncertain. Should he wait? Continue? There's no sandglass to consult, just instinct. He starts again, adjusting his breath to match the new rhythm of the air. And this is the heart of it. The Persians didn't need mechanical precision. They didn't ask time to obey. They listened to it, smelled it, felt when it changed, and adapted. Maybe not perfect, but human. You rise as the second Ga concludes. The temple is warm now. The smoke has thickened, gold in the high air, sweet and ancient. A low bell rings once. Not as a time signal, but as an echo, a way to remind everyone that something has passed and something else is beginning. You step back into the corridor. The smoke follows, curling behind you like a cat, unhurried, invisible to most, but not to you. You've learned to smell the hour. You're walking now, barefoot still, through a narrow alley tucked behind a line of terraced courtyards. The sun's gotten higher, warmer, though not yet fierce. You pass between two fig trees, their shadows sharp and dappled, and emerge into a small pavilion overlooking the city's rooftops. The wind carries up the sound of market sellers just beginning their midday routines, but here, high and quiet, another ritual is unfolding. In front of you, a long stone bench, low and rectangular, its surface marked with tiny ridges, ash stains, and burnt corners. This is a scent clock bench, and today it holds one of the more mesmerizing devices the Persians ever devised, the full scent sequence, a kind of olfactory hourglass composed entirely of incense. You crouch to watch as a temple servant, wrinkled hands, honey-colored robe, calm as a house cat, arranges a chain of incense bundles, each one slightly different in shape and hue. The first is golden, the second reddish, the third a deep olive green, almost black. They're placed end to end like sleepy caterpillars in a shallow trench carved into the stone. No markings, no numbers, just burned memory from years of repetition. He lights the first bundle with a slow, practiced flick of a glowing coal. A whisper of frankincense curls up like a promise. You breathe in, bright, lemony, almost too clean, and then sit cross-legged, ready to watch it change. This is your clock for the next several hours. Each bundle burns for roughly 30 minutes, give or take depending on the humidity, the wind, the mood of the fire spirits, or so some still say. As the first stick finishes, its flame ignites the tip of the next, like a polite handoff between dancers. The scent shifts, from frankincense to cinnamon bark, then on to myrrh, clove, and eventually juniper, whose smoke smells like the end of a winter forest dream. You notice a bowl of cool water placed beside the bench. Not for drinking, for steam. If the wind picks up or the air gets dry, the servant dips a reed into the bowl and flicks droplets near the burning bundles. The hiss is soft. The scent sharpens. The fire steadies. This, too, is a form of timekeeping by climate. Historians still argue whether these scent chains were used exclusively in temples or whether nobles had their own custom smoke routines. Some references in Achaemenid poetry suggest that wealthy homes maintained their own private hours, using fragrances that matched their mood or their gardens. "Come to me at Cedar Fall," one love poem reads, "when the smoke grows thick and the figs have split." Romantic and practical. But here, in this upper chamber, you're witnessing the standard sequence, a kind of multi-sensory clock cycle. The temple uses it to coordinate events across the compound. When the clove blend burns, scribes should be reviewing documents. When the myrrh comes, the kitchens begin their prep for evening offerings. And when juniper hits the air, time to sweep the courtyards. You lean back, letting your fingers trace the stone. It's warm now. The ash beneath the bundles glows soft red. You can't help but think, modern clocks are so loud, ticking, buzzing, reminding you always that time is passing fast. "This clock?" it whispers. It becomes the room. The servant stirs slightly, then points to the second bundle. It's near its end now. A curl of smoke rises straighter, hotter. The scent has grown darker, more bitter. Cinnamon giving way to benzoin, maybe. A resin that smells like warm vanilla left out in the sun too long. It's a signal. Midday approaches, and then an odd thing. As the third bundle catches, the servant sprinkles a few dried rose petals into the smoke stream. The petals don't change the burn much, but the scent brightens, softens. You ask quietly, why? He answers without looking. So the next hour feels kinder. Aesthetic timekeeping, emotional scheduling. You don't just measure time, you design it. You close your eyes for a moment and let the scents guide you. You smell citrus, then wood, then something you can't name. A desert flower? A spice lost to modern kitchens? It doesn't matter. This isn't about knowing. It's about noticing. Later, you'll read in a dusty scroll that some Persian officials could identify hours to the minute based purely on the burn profile of a certain resin blend. They called it nose time. You chuckle at that now because you get it. You really do. Time by smell isn't a limitation. It's a luxury. But it's not perfect. The wind shifts once, and the flame gutters. A pause. The chain almost breaks. The servant frowns, then blows gently to keep the connection. No panic, just patience. You watch the last bundle catch fire, the smoke now thick and spiced, curling like a dragon's sigh toward the open ceiling. Below, the sounds of the city swell. Someone's baking flatbread, a child's laughing. Somewhere a goat is very, very upset. But up here, it's still. The scent clock ticks on, not with hands or gears, but with grace. Each hour inhaled, exhaled, then gone. The final bundle flares. The hour turns. The day continues. You stand slowly, stretched, half dreaming, marked by myrrh and jasmine. You've just lived through 4 hours of scent, and somehow they passed more gently than any number could. The stairs are cool beneath your feet, shaded from the midday sun that now strikes the palace courtyards in long golden streaks. You descend slowly, drawn by the changing scent in the air. Not floral anymore, not sacred. It smells official, like something practical is about to happen. You're entering the bureaucratic heart of the Achaemenid complex, where scrolls are stored, sandals creak on polished stone, and incense doesn't signal devotion. It schedules the administrative machine of an empire. The corridors here are narrow, purposeful. Stone shelves hold bundles of parchment tied with red string. Scribes bend over tablets, their reeds scratching softly. But you notice no hourglasses, no bells, and certainly no oil clocks. Instead, nestled in alcoves every 30 steps or so, are tiny bronze braziers, each cradling a carefully burning cone of fragrant resin. You pause at one. It's a cone made from cinnamon dust and beeswax, tapered like a pine nut and flecked with something golden, probably dried orange rind. It burns slowly and evenly, its ash falling in a soft ring around the base. This cone was lit at mid-morning. When the ash ring is halfway, it's time to swap scribes. That's the system. Time in the Achaemenid bureaucratic wing isn't marked with voice or gong, but with cones of scent, each engineered to burn for a precise length of time, usually 1 or 2 hours. A junior official oversees them, moving from alcove to alcove with a pouch full of spares and a small clay shovel for ash. He passes you now, muttering to himself, checking the depth of burn. He replaces one cone with another, this one richer in color, probably cardamom-based, used for the midday watch. These scent shifts coordinate rotations. Scribes trade shifts, runners begin or end their rounds, and guards relieve one another based not on a bell, but on the changing perfume of the hallway. You peek into one of the scribe rooms. 2 men sit hunched over a long table covered in rolled scrolls, seal rings, and ink pots. A small incense dish sits between them, wafting a gentle spiral of peppery smoke. The younger of the 2 scribes has stopped writing. He's sniffing the air. "Almost curry seed," he says softly. The elder nods. Another quarter hour, then the change. You've just witnessed the Persian version of a punch clock. Historians still debate whether these cones were calibrated by length, density, or a secret formula involving lunar phases and beeswax softness. A few archaeological fragments suggest that royal artisans had specialized molds for incense cones, some even embossed with marks like half watch or sun peak blend. Were these decorative or genuinely functional labels? No one knows, but they look very official, which counts for something. You follow the junior official to the central court chamber, where the empire's administrators plan festivals, issue orders, and argue over livestock taxes. It's not all grandeur. Someone's currently shouting about grain rot, but the timing of each audience is just as precise as the king's own calendar. Near the dais where the head official sits, there's a tall glass cylinder shielded by a brass frame. Inside, a slow-burning twisted rope of incense wound around a central rod like a cinnamon-scented snake. This is the office day timer, and it burns from top to bottom, marking the progress of the workday. Each twist of the rope represents one petition cycle, about 20 minutes. When one curl has burned through, a new petitioner enters. The scent changes slightly every twist. Today's version starts floral, becomes woodsy, and ends with a sharp citrus bite. Scribes call it lemon finish. No one really likes it, but it does keep people alert. You linger by the rope, watching ash fall in slow, even flakes. A whisper of coriander hits your nose. The petitioner's time is nearly up. A bell would be faster, sure. But this is gentler. No sharp sounds, no alarms, just a gradual shift in atmosphere that lets people feel time instead of being interrupted by it. You glance at a side table and notice an unused cone labeled with a delicate red swirl, a high-status blend perhaps, meant for ambassadors or festival days. For now, it waits, wrapped in silk, smelling faintly of bergamot and pine tar. You begin to understand the deeper magic here. Incense doesn't just measure time, it creates emotional texture. A boring tax petition wrapped in lemony pepper oil feels brisk, transactional. A treaty negotiation held in lavender smoke? Soothing, almost forgiving. And beyond mood, there's memory. A scribe might remember a particularly tense session as the juniper hour, or say, "I signed that edict just before the cedar gave way to mint." In modern terms, it would be like remembering life events by which playlist was playing, but better scented. As you exit the chamber, a courier brushes past, bowing quickly. He smells of sweat, leather, and a lingering hint of burned clove. You imagine him pausing along his route, lighting a signal cone at each rest station to note how long he's been riding. But that's another story. Here, in the kingdom's quiet chambers of ink and ash, you've watched a day unfold through smoke, delicate, measured, softly fragrant. The work is steady but never rushed. Time isn't pushed here, it's inhaled. And as you climb back into the sun, your robe catching the scent of fading cardamom, you realize this entire bureaucracy runs on breath, one slow exhale at a time. The sun is high now, throwing harsh, clean light across the city's walls, but inside the palace's shaded courtyards, time still moves by scent, not shadow. You follow the winding path of the junior official, though he's vanished into another wing by now. What catches your eye instead is a narrow alcove tucked behind a decorative screen where something peculiar flickers in soft amber light. You approach and find what might be the cleverest little contraption of all, an early smoke clock, simple but brilliant, a kind of aromatic hourglass but with no sand, no ticking, no hands at all. It's little more than a small terracotta dome, vented with holes in even rows. Each hole holds a tiny incense thread, thin as embroidery floss, dipped in fragrant oils and rolled in powdered resin. At the tip of the dome, a coiled taper is already burning, moving downward like a snail through the top layer. Each time it reaches a thread, that thread flares gently and begins to smolder on its own, releasing a specific scent, a marker of the hour. You sit beside it, utterly transfixed. The first scent that greets you is dried pomegranate peel, tangy, almost fruity, with a whisper of bitterness. It's the 5th hour of the day, apparently. When the thread finishes burning, roughly 15 minutes, a tiny bead of sandal ash drops onto a metal plate, barely audible. The next thread begins to burn. Now it's bay leaf and fig sap. A darker smell, more herbal, grounding. It seeps into the warm air like a patient cat curling beside a brazier. You breathe it in and feel calmer, slower. This is the rhythm of the aromatic thread clock, an invention most scholars attribute to Middle Achaemenid engineers who worked in temple workshops. Though only a few fragmented designs remain, etched on broken tiles or sketched in merchant scrolls, it's clear they were used as quiet timekeepers in spaces where water clocks would have been too noisy or unreliable. Some versions were worn on the body, in miniature pouches, smoldering slowly as the wearer walked. Others sat in the corners of rooms, their scent trails rising like incense ghosts to mark how long a guest had lingered, or when it was time to refill the tea. Historians still argue whether the threads were timed more by length or thickness. Some claim that oils were used to delay combustion, myrrh to slow the burn, frankincense to speed it up. Others suggest that special composite fibers, made from a blend of flax and goat hair, were used to calibrate the exact rate of smoke drift. Nothing concrete survives, of course, but you can almost imagine the artisan adjusting each strand, fingers stained with resin, testing for perfection. You glance up and notice another object, half buried in the corner, a clay cone pierced with vertical channels like the spokes of a wheel. This was another form of smoke clock, one that vented aromatic air through different holes depending on the burn depth. Each hour, a different scent would emerge from a different direction, an olfactory compass that told time not just by smell, but by where the smell came from. Standing near one of these would have felt like listening to time pass from different corners of the room. North smells like rosewood, east smells like honey bark, south, lemon balm and despair. Okay, maybe just lemon balm. You close your eyes and imagine the world of the artisan, hunched over his bench, testing threads and oils. Maybe he starts the day with olive pit charcoal, a slow burner, then switches to acacia resin for the midday sequence. He knows the scent markers like you know the taste of your favorite tea. By dusk, he's surrounded by curls of overlapping fragrance, a soft clock ticking, but for the nose. Nearby, a kitchen servant passes through, pauses, and glances at the dome. "Still fig sap," he murmurs, then moves on. That's how familiar this is. You don't check the hour, you just notice it in the air. What's especially charming is how customizable these clocks were. Nobles could commission bespoke scent sequences: lavender for breakfast, cinnamon for mid-morning, spikenard for early evening. Each house had its own routine, a kind of scented signature. You could tell which estate you were in by the way thyme smelled in its halls. Some families even passed their recipes down, generation to generation. "Great-grandfather's cedar blend," they'd say. Or, "We still use grandmother's rosemary lotus mix for festival days." Forget heirloom jewelry. These folks inherited ours. You imagine walking into a friend's home and saying, "Ah, you've hit juniper o'clock." Much more pleasant than a ticking wristwatch, you have to admit. And while modern scholars scoff, what about error? What about standardization? What about when a thread burns too fast because the cat knocked it sideways? You can't help but think they're missing the point. This wasn't about mathematical precision. It was about experiential rhythm. The thread burns down. The pomegranate is gone. Fig sap lingers. The next scent begins. Clove and dried plum skin. A richer aroma, almost edible. You breathe it in. A single thread, a simple ember, and suddenly the hour has passed. Not counted. Lived. You're back outside now, shaded by a linen awning and walking alongside a long portico where sunlight dapples through slatted wood like golden honey. A warm breeze picks up, dusty, citrus-touched, and you hear the rhythmic clop of hooves in the distance. Then, out of the haze, a line of mounted couriers comes into view, each cloaked in travel-stained linen, their belts heavy with scrolls, signal rods, and pouches of scented cones. They're part of the Piradazish, the ancient Persian courier system that once covered nearly 2,700 kilometers of road in swift, coordinated relays. Every inn, every station, every relay post was marked not by flags or horns, but by smoke. One rider dismounts just ahead of you. He's young, no more than 20, with a sun-cracked grin and a pouch slung across his chest. From it, he pulls a small conical incense burner, the portable kind, a travel-sized brazier with a pierced lid, lined in clay and trimmed with brass. A stone platform nearby holds dried dung for fuel. It's all very practical, very efficient. But the ritual? Still delicately ceremonial. He lights a cone. The scent that curls into the air is lemon balm and charred pine, the designated marker for this particular rest stop. Each station had its own signature fragrance, a kind of olfactory waypoint along the royal road. Riders weren't just tracking distance, they were sniffing the journey. These scents weren't random. According to Persian road scrolls, some of which survive as scorched fragments in clay jars, each cone was designed to burn for 90 minutes, enough time to water the horses, eat, and rest before continuing the route. If the cone burned faster, the station was flagged for dryness or too much wind. If it failed to burn, the clay pot was cracked or the mix too moist. The courier crouches and wafts the smoke with his hand, carefully. Not toward himself, but toward a low-carved incense marker stone set just off the road. A simple granite square with a shallow spiral etched into the surface. When the scent reaches the spiral's center, that's the signal. The smoke has cleared the area, and the time to remount has begun. You sit cross-legged in the dust, watching as two more riders arrive and repeat the process. One lights a cone of dried sage and bergamot, the other a chunkier blend that smells like bitter almond, and something vaguely metallic, possibly the infamous alert blend, used for long night riding shifts and rumored to include powdered mustard seed to jolt the senses. Historians still argue whether these blends were issued centrally, like royal courier uniforms, or customized per region. Some say specific governors created scent profiles for their provinces, leading to everything from Caspian pine mix to southern spiced orange. Others believed the blends were more symbolic, chosen to reflect the season or the mood of the route. Cool myrtle for winter, hot cumin in summer. You're inclined to believe both. One rider you pass wears a blue sash with a tiny vial tucked into the knot. He catches your gaze, holds it up, and taps it once. "Back up," he says with a grin, then gallops off. You find a spot near the rider's shade canopy where another traveler is tending to a small incense timekeeper strip. It's a thin slat of cedar wood with 4 notches, each holding a stub of different incense. One by one, they're lit in sequence. First juniper, then dried mint, followed by rosewood, and finally charcoal-dusted myrrh. When the last ember fades, it's time to ride again. There's a practical poetry to it. This was how ancient Persian logistics worked. Flame as schedule, scent as signal. Instead of sending paper timetables with the riders, the stations themselves scented the message. An official might receive a dispatch still infused with the clove of Susa or the pepper smoke of Sardis. He'd know not just the message, but where and when it had traveled. And riders didn't just follow smoke, they left it too. The most trusted among them carried trail incense, a slow-burning resin that released a sharp, woodsy scent as they rode. It drifted along the path behind them. Another rider following hours later could track the trail by scent, even at night. Horses would recognize the smell and adjust their pace accordingly. It was a kind of ghost rider system, one courier leading the next, even in absence. The only flaw? Rain. When a downpour hit, everything changed. The cones sputtered, the threads soaked, the trail vanished. One scroll notes a scent panic in 418 BCE, when a summer storm erased a 2-day olfactory chain and forced the station at Zariaspa to restart the entire route from scratch. The backup cones were too damp, riders arrived late, and someone's scroll, presumably urgent, arrived smelling like wet ash and goat hair. You smile at that. There's something beautifully human in it. The idea that an entire communication system, one of the best the ancient world had, could falter because a batch of incense wouldn't light. No cloud backups, just damp cones and disappointed noses. The final rider mounts now. His horse snorts, impatient. The last scent, frankincense and burnt citrus peel, is still hanging in the air as he pulls on the reins and gallops off. A little spiral of smoke chases behind him, dissolving in the wind. You remain seated, the dust warm beneath you, the station returning to quiet. One last ember glows orange, then fades, and with it, another hour gone, burned, inhaled, and left behind on the wind. You return to the palace by the longer route, letting your feet carry you slowly through the shaded walkways that wrap like silk ribbons around the inner gardens. A heavy stillness hangs in the air now, not quite afternoon, not quite evening. The kind of hour that slouches, day drunk on heat and perfume. And in this mellow gap of time, you finally reach one of the more curious rooms in the whole complex, the Emperor's scheduling chamber. Not his throne room, not his war hall, just a surprisingly cozy corner suite filled with soft light, high latticed windows, and the faint, ever-present aroma of slow-burning cedar and almond blossom. And at its center, sitting cross-legged on a cushioned dais, his robe a river of pale teal silk, is the royal nose. Yes, that's a real title. This man's job, this esteemed, hereditary, highly trained job, is to smell the time. More precisely, to ensure that the emperor's day moves forward according to the preset schedule of scents, from breakfast through council meetings, poetry readings, and ceremonial naps. You step in just as a midday cone is reaching its crescendo. The scent is thick, oily, and floral, tuberose and a touch of saffron. The royal nose lifts his chin, breathes deeply, and slowly nods. That's the signal. The emperor's nap time is officially over. A servant, waiting like a statue beside a velvet curtain, bows and glides off toward the emperor's quarters. No clanging bell, no knocking, just scent. Time made breathable. This is the imperial timekeeping method. A full day mapped out with an arc of fragrances, each carefully crafted to signal not just the hour, but the mood appropriate to it. Early morning, bright and woodsy, cedar, lemon rind, a little hyssop. Courtly debate, dry, earthy. Vetiver, clove, maybe even powdered acacia bark. Romantic evenings? You guessed it. Rose, sandalwood, and just a tease of burnt fig. You ease closer to the dais and notice something peculiar. No visible clockwork, no sandglass. Instead, an intricate wooden panel inset into the floor, covered with tiny drawers, one for each scent cone. The royal nose reaches down, slides open drawer 12, and retrieves a new blend wrapped in gold-threaded silk. It's tied with a green cord. Late afternoon, ceremonial tea blend. He holds it like a chalice. The emperor, it said, never wears a timepiece, not even a sundial ring. Why would he need one when the air itself tells him what to do? Historians still argue whether the royal nose operated solo or had an entire staff of sub-noses. Some accounts mention a scent apprentice, trained to detect burn impurities and monitor draft conditions. Others claim that perfumes were rotated seasonally and mixed daily in a secret chamber known only to a few. The recipes, some say, were locked in jade boxes, opened only at dawn by whispering 3 verses of royal poetry. Or maybe that last bit was just dramatic storytelling. You wouldn't be surprised either way. The new cone is placed on a silver stand, shaped like a stylized lotus. A glowing ember is touched to its base. The smoke rises, not fast, not showy, but with the confidence of something that's been burning every day for 200 years. The room begins to shift. The scent unfurls like a scroll, fennel seed, dried peach skin, and a final sharp edge of white pepper. Time has moved forward. A moment later, you hear faint footsteps in the corridor, measured, deliberate. A eunuch bearing a lacquered tray of steamed quince slices and spiced tea glides past, guided not by bell or call, but by scent alone. This is more than routine. It's choreography. A scent-based ballet where every dancer knows exactly when to spin because the air told them to. You sit, marveling, as the royal nose leans forward to adjust the silver dish slightly. A tiny puff of smoke curls leftward and hits a hanging tapestry, a warning that the airflow's shifted. He murmurs something under his breath and lifts a feather fan from a side table. One gentle wave, and the smoke rights itself. Disaster averted. The empire endures. You wonder briefly, what happens if the nose gets the timing wrong? What if he lights jasmine instead of pine? What if the emperor ends up attending war council during sandalwood hour and falls asleep mid-treaty? Apparently it has happened. One famous case, recorded on a fraying parchment in the royal archives, tells of a poorly labeled cone that caused the emperor to take a bath 2 hours early and miss an envoy from Bactria. That cone was called the diplomatic disaster blend. It now lives in infamy. But most days, the timing is perfect. Because this isn't just about telling the emperor when it's time for tea. It's about framing the day, emotionally, spiritually, even politically. Imagine governing an empire by feeling the air shift, by knowing when to sign a decree because the vetiver just hit your lungs. Time not as a number but as an experience. And now the scent changes again, softening, warming. Chamomile and nutmeg. Sunset hour is coming. Soon the court will gather in the long audience hall, not because of a horn or a gong, because the breeze passing through corridors and tapestries now smells like the end of the day, and because a man, seated quietly on a silk cushion, just gave the nod. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. You now know the time, without ever needing to look. Now you're gliding softly down a side passage, leaving the emperor's time-scented sanctuary behind, and following your nose toward something warmer, richer, and decidedly hungrier. The corridors widen, the air thickens. Soon, you catch the unmistakable waft of clarified butter, pounded spices, and wood smoke. Congratulations! You've reached the palace kitchens. And here, too, time burns softly in the air. You duck under a hanging curtain and step into a high-ceilinged room aglow with amber light from dozens of tandoor ovens. Clay pots line the walls. Copper vessels simmer on low fires. The rhythm of the place is more musical than mechanical. Spoons tapping, oil hissing, mortars grinding. But beneath it all, something else guides the pace. Incense threads, burning slowly along a shelf above the main prep tables. This isn't just for fragrance, it's for timing. Each thread is a measuring stick of the senses, burning at a known rate, releasing distinct aromas that act like kitchen timers. And instead of buzzing or ringing, they offer gentle nudges: when to stir, when to knead, when to stop roasting before the coriander turns bitter. A cook waves you over, one hand dusted with flour, the other adjusting a strand of burning cinnamon bark and mint fiber. "This one's for bread rise," he says. "When it finishes, we bake." Simple as that. You watch as dough is folded into soft sheer mail rounds and covered with a damp cloth. The smell of the thread above, sharp, then sweet, then peppery, marks each stage of readiness. You notice another thread off to the side, thinner and paler. "That one's for lentil stew," says another cook. "Has to burn exactly halfway before we add the cumin oil. No sooner, or it clouds." And sure enough, when the thread begins to glow halfway down, the cook tilts a small bronze ladle over the bubbling pot. A puff of steam rises, hot, fragrant, slightly bitter, perfectly on time. There are no clocks in here, no sandglasses, no impatient buzzers, just burning threads, patient cooks, and smoke that sings instructions. Historians still argue whether these kitchen chords were widespread or reserved for royal kitchens. Some excavations suggest similar setups in provincial estates. Nobles, too, timed their braces with fragrant twine. One preserved scroll even includes a brief recipe note: roast chickpeas till the rose thread fades. That's the kind of instruction you'd expect from a grandmother, not a government manual. And yet, here it is, culinary timekeeping by smell. One of the older cooks, his beard streaked with soot and flour, offers you a seat near a low prep table. He points to a braided coil lying beside it. "That's the dessert strand," he says. "Rose petal, saffron thread, and a touch of benzoin." You lean in and catch the scent. Heady, floral, dreamy. It burns slowly with a thin line of blue smoke curling toward the ceiling. "That one," he continues, "tells us when the rice pudding's done." You glance over at the pot bubbling nearby, the milk thick and creamy, studded with crushed pistachios and apricot slivers. No thermometer needed, no frantic stirring, just the scent of rose fading into warm ash. Timing by fragrance doesn't just make sense here, it makes everything better. Mistakes are rarer, the cooks are calmer. No one's shouting times across the kitchen or setting timers that jolt the room. Everything happens when the air says it should. And more than that, there's a kind of memory to it. Ask any of the cooks how long to bake flatbread, and they'll answer not in minutes, but in scent. As long as it takes for the cardamom to soften, or until the cumin thread smells sweet, not sharp. You don't need to watch a clock when you trust your nose. Of course, there are pitfalls. The door to the courtyard swings open unexpectedly, sending in a breeze. A thread wavers, flares too hot. One of the cooks swears under his breath and adjusts the coil, muttering something about last week's mango disaster. Yes, the system depends on calm air and dry days, and let's be honest, a little luck. But it works. It's been working for generations. You step aside as two assistants lift a massive pot of rice, steaming, sticky, tinged golden from saffron, onto a serving tray. A final sprinkle of dried rose petals, a drizzle of ghee, and it's done. Right on time. A thin trail of incense still curls upward from a ceramic dish nearby. The thread has burned to ash. A bowl of rice pudding is placed in your hands, warm and creamy. You breathe in the scent, almond, rose, milk, and a whisper of spice, and take a slow bite. Not too early, not too late. Just right. Your fingers still carry the faint stickiness of rice pudding as you step out of the kitchens and into a stone corridor lit with soft, shifting light. The scent lingers behind you, rose, ghee, and almond, but a new smell soon begins to drift in from the east wing. Sandalwood, juniper, and the unmistakable sacred trace of glowing charcoal. You follow it, of course, and soon you find yourself in a quieter space. The walls are smooth, pale limestone. The windows are narrow slits, letting in only the most filtered rays of sun. There are no tapestries here, no chatter, no bronze dishes clinking on stone, just the slow, even sound of a breath drawn, then released. You've entered a fire altar chamber, a place where Zoroastrian priests chant prayers in rhythm with smoke. But unlike the temples you visited earlier, this one is not for large ceremonies. This is private, personal, perhaps for a member of the royal family or a court scholar, a space where prayer and timekeeping become the same act. A single priest kneels before the sacred fire, his white robe almost glowing in the dim light. His eyes are half-lidded, not in sleep but in careful focus. The air is thick with layers of scent, each coming in quiet waves. You sit along the edge of the chamber. The floor is cool beneath you. There's a subtle trace of resin in the stones themselves, soaked in over years, centuries perhaps, of sacred burns. Beside the fire, a small copper tray holds a neat row of incense discs, each marked with a tiny carved symbol, a flame, a crescent, a leaf, a sunburst. They're stacked in the order of the 5 Gas, Zoroastrian time divisions that segment the day according to ritual duty and spiritual focus. The priest selects one, the third in the row, and places it gently onto a burning coal. There is no rush. The disc hisses, then sighs, releasing a plume of bitter citrus and crushed laurel. This marks the Rapithwin Ga, the time for reflection and learning, a midday window where prayer and wisdom were to be shared in equal measure. The priest begins his chant. You don't need to understand the words. The sound flows like a river already carrying you. And you begin to notice something else. The chant and the incense are perfectly synchronized. Each verse lands as the smoke thickens. Each pause comes just as the plume begins to fade. This is no coincidence. The prayers are timed to the incense burn, or perhaps the incense is calibrated to the prayer cycle. Either way, it's a dance of breath, sound, and fire, a form of devotion where the passage of time is not measured but embodied. One scroll you remember reading described this practice as the hour given shape, and it's easy to see why. You're watching time move, not as a number or a tick, but as a slow exhale of sacred scent. The priest lifts his hand briefly, signaling the midpoint of the disc's burn. Another assistant enters silently and places a small reed tray on the floor. On it, a sliver of dried fig, a cup of cool water, and a second smaller incense cone. This one laced with basil and crushed apricot wood. It will burn just long enough to time a single meditation, 4 minutes, maybe 5. Historians still argue whether the Zoroastrians created the first fully scent-based prayer clocks. Some claim earlier examples existed in Babylon. Others insist these were developed later, under Sassanid influence. But there's no question that here, in this room, a tradition as old as fire itself is counting the minutes with fragrance. A soft cough. The second cone is halfway through. The priest's chant grows slower now, lower, more resonant. It matches the descending curl of smoke that coils around the room like a ribbon drawn by hand. You close your eyes and feel it, the air thicker, warmer, more focused. Somewhere behind you, the fig tree branches shift in the wind, and then silence. The chant ends. The cone dims. The priest bows once deeply, then leans forward to stir the coals gently with a long-handled iron wand. He doesn't look up. His eyes are still half closed, as if he's watching the last moments of the hour float away into the shadows. You open your eyes to find that the smoke has nearly gone. All that remains is a faint glimmer of ash on the tray, a gentle warmth in your chest, and the feeling that an entire sacred hour has passed without a clock in sight. You rise quietly and step back out into the corridor. Behind you, the fire burns on, unchanging, eternal. But the scent, that has changed. And that's how you know the time of reflection has ended. The next hour begins with a different scent, a different chant, a different breath, and all of it, like the smoke, moves gently forward. You step into a passageway where the floor dips slightly, and the ceiling lifts into a vaulted arch painted with pale ochre patterns. It's quieter here, emptier too. The warmth from the fire chamber lingers on your skin, but the scent has changed again, something crisp, earthy, and resinous, a blend of pine ash and tamarisk, perhaps. You follow it to a broad doorway opening into a workshop courtyard. Not royal, not sacred, just ordinary, which makes it all the more beautiful. Sunlight falls in neat squares across workbenches, stone slabs, and piles of raw materials. Reeds, fabrics, dyes, chunks of soapstone, coils of rope. This is the domain of the craftspeople, potters, woodturners, scribes, and weavers. It's a quiet hive of movement, and yet no one seems rushed. You start to notice why. Across several workstations, propped on bricks or hung from nails, are small dishes or stands, each holding burning incense cones or slow glowing threads. Not ornamental, not for prayer. These are work clocks. A potter squints into his kiln, waiting for the scent of cedar blend ash to signal the right moment to stop firing. A scribe scratches steadily with a reed pen, pausing only when the pepper resin cone smolders down to its base. And beside a loom, a weaver gently pulls the last pass of golden thread through the frame as a curl of coriander smoke signals the end of the weaving block. This is time not sliced into minutes, but stacked in smells. You crouch beside one older man, his hands mottled with dye, his eyebrows formidable. He's sanding a wooden comb with deliberate care, and beside him burns a narrow incense stick, twisted like rope, and giving off a scent that reminds you of dried peaches and cinnamon bark. "That's to keep the rhythm," he says without looking. "One comb per third of the stick, no more, no less." You ask what happens if he finishes early. He shrugs. "Then I wait." You grin. The system works. Historians still puzzle over how standardized these methods were. Did the workers agree on how long each blend burned? Were there scent calendars? Was there a training manual somewhere that read, "Add honey-laced pine thread at midday to align the tasks of scribes and tanners"? Or was it all simply passed down, from hand to hand, nostril to nostril? The answer is probably both. You walk slowly between benches and tools, your footsteps muffled by layers of reed matting and powdery dust. The air shifts as you move. Myrrh by the carpenters, dill seed near the engravers, burnt orange peel around the dye vats. You begin to feel time here too, not as ticking or pressure, but as a rhythm, a series of fragrant cues that give the day shape. Tasks don't just start and end, they transition with intention. A teenage girl in a cobalt robe slices leather thongs at a nearby bench. She glances at the cone beside her, a tiny spark left at the tip. She finishes her strip, sets down the knife, and stands. She's done. No bell, no clock. Just the slow, scent-based tempo of her labor. Another artisan adjusts a multi-stick array, 4 threads bound together with wax, each designed to burn at a different speed. As the top one fades, he'll shift tools. As the second burns, he'll begin sanding. The third? Polishing. The fourth is labeled tea and stretch, because, of course, even timekeepers need a break. A dog sleeps under one of the benches, his nose twitching. He too knows when the day turns. There's even a water basin in one corner where threads are dipped to slow their burn, should a project require extra time. This is called smoke stretching, and it's a kind of cheat that no one minds, as long as you don't do it during tax season. You reach the far end of the courtyard, where sunlight catches the ash floating lazily in the air, and you realize this isn't a place of rush or delay. It's a place where time flows as gently as steam, as quiet as breath, and where even the smallest task carries the dignity of rhythm. One final blend catches your attention. It's burning near a scrollmaker's bench, something rich and musky, almost like crushed date seeds and molasses. The scent is unfamiliar. You ask what it is. He looks up, surprised. "Ah, that's delay blend," he says. "Burns slow when I need more time. Doesn't rush the ink." You nod, and you believe him. You stand there, letting that heavy sweetness wrap around you, thick and calm and completely unbothered by deadlines. This is the hour that smells of paper and patience. And it drifts on, beautifully. The courtyard narrows into a hallway, shaded and cool again. The scent of molasses fades as you walk, replaced by a sharper, cooler note: tamarind, crushed juniper, and the ghost of old smoke. You're heading now toward a wing less about production and more about preparation. Not just of objects or food, but of the self. You find yourself in a long rectangular room lit by slatted shutters and lined with polished bronze mirrors, stone benches, and little clay bowls filled with soft powders. This is the bathing and grooming hall, where courtiers come to be steamed, scrubbed, oiled, and, yes, scent-timed. A woman in an ivory robe adjusts the coals beneath a shallow stone brazier at the center of the room. Above it, on a curved stand, hangs a drip cage, something between a chandelier and a sieve. Slowly melting lumps of scented tallow drip onto the coals below, one by one, releasing controlled bursts of fragrance that guide the grooming rituals. You sit near one of the benches and watch. Every few minutes, a new drop hits the coals with a faint hiss. A puff of scent floats out. First it's mugwort and citrus rind, brisk and wakeful. That means it's scrub time. Two attendants begin rubbing down a courtier's arms and neck with ground chickpea flour. The pace is casual, unhurried, like someone cleaning a beloved antique. After 6 drops, the scent shifts, cardamom and myrrh. That's the signal to begin the oil massage. Almond oil warmed in copper pots is brushed along the skin with long, graceful strokes. No one counts minutes. No one checks the sun. The scent says when to begin and when to let go. You notice a row of incense thread combs hanging from the wall. Each is fitted with a slow-burning fiber: lavender for hair oiling, frankincense for beard trimming, dill seed for nail painting. Each task moves in time with scent, not as a background detail, but as the clock itself. It's oddly intimate, watching people calibrate their bodily care by fragrance. One man, seated calmly with cucumber slices over his eyes, some things never change, lifts his hand and gently waves it in the air, measuring the shift in aroma. "We're halfway to rinse," he murmurs. His attendant nods. This isn't indulgence. It's structure, just scented. Historians still argue whether the bathhouses and grooming rooms of Persia used incense solely for pleasure or as part of a ritualized system of timing. Some sources suggest that public baths in cities like Ecbatana and Pasargadae had standard incense schedules, much like call to prayer bells or market horns. Certain scents marked certain bathing windows: rosemary for morning, spikenard for night, juniper for the purification hours before religious festivals. You watch now as another blend is added to the coals: poppy seed oil and fig bark, the last in the grooming cycle. That scent signals rest. The courtier reclines on a cushioned divan. His skin shines faintly with oil. His hair is neatly oiled and braided. The attendants withdraw. A handmaiden enters, carrying a fresh robe and a tiny vial of musk blend, reserved for final dabs on the neck and wrists. The scent is warm and deep, the kind of thing that stays with you long after the hour has passed. You lean your head back, imagining what it would be like to live this way, to prepare for your day, not with phone alarms or coffee timers, but with a trail of scent cues, each one as familiar as your own heartbeat. The scent changes again. You recognize it now. rose stem, and crushed fennel. That's the scent of arrival, the cue that the day's formal events are about to begin. One by one, the courtiers rise. They murmur soft goodbyes, adjust their sashes, and walk with quiet dignity out through the long hallway. Their steps are light, their movements perfectly timed, not because someone clapped or called, but because the air told them it was time to go. You remain for a few breaths longer. A few last drops of scented tallow hit the coals and sizzle. The smoke rises, fades. The hour has passed, not loudly, not urgently, just fully. The corridors have shifted again, broader now and laced with gentle echoes as you make your way toward the library wing. The air cools further, touched by the scent of old paper, sun-dried reeds, and something sharper. Clove? Vetiver? No, not quite. You follow the trail until you spot it. A shallow bowl of incense ash placed on a pedestal just outside a tall cedar door. You step inside and time slows. This is the scriptorium, where records are copied, laws transcribed, and poems inked onto scrolls by steady hands and steadier noses. Light filters in through high windows, gold-dusted by particles of parchment dust. Long desks stretch beneath the arches, each one attended by a hunched figure in quiet, meditative labor. And along each row, you guessed it, burning incense threads. But here, the purpose is less about signaling start and stop, and more about guiding pace. Each thread is carefully calibrated to release fragrance at a rate that encourages focused, even writing. Too fast to burn? The scribe writes too quickly. Too pungent? They grow distracted. But a perfect thread, thin, even, made from powdered orris root and sweet bark. And the room hums in harmony. You slide onto a low bench and observe. A young scribe nearby is copying a royal edict. His eyes flick from scroll to blank parchment, his reed stylus tapping in rhythm with the incense. Every few breaths, he inhales deeply, measuring his tempo by the curl and hue of the smoke. He's not watching time. He's breathing it. One thread marks half a column of text. When it burns through, he trims his pen, stretches his fingers, and lights the next. A few desks down, another scribe leans back. His incense has reached its final inch, releasing a last puff of dried citrus peel and pine resin. He rolls up his finished scroll and places it gently in a reed basket marked with that day's fragrance code. You peer closer and notice something delightful. The scroll containers themselves are scented. A short poem? Wrapped in rose bark paper? A legal notice? Infused with smoky cedar oil? And letters? Letters are often perfumed with saffron thread or powdered almond leaf. Invisible timestamps that whisper when they were written. Historians still argue whether this system was intentional or a happy accident of storage. Some claim that scent-coding scrolls helped archivists remember their order without dates. Others say it simply made reading more pleasant. One inscription from a clerk reads, "May your poem arrive still sweet with clove and not forgotten in dust." That seems wonderfully human. You walk along the rear wall where more exotic blends smolder on miniature platforms. Acacia ash for epic verse, tamarind smoke for philosophical treatises, and one marked with a green streak, a mint-cinnamon blend said to inspire faster memory work. This one's burning near a boy hunched over a geometry tablet, his mouth twisting slightly as he calculates angles and proportions. The air around him shivers with the sharpness of math smoke. Even education, it seems, has a scent schedule. There's a kind of logic here that feels ancient and yet oddly modern. Scent as study rhythm, scent as mental framework, scent as filing system. You imagine a scholar saying, "Ah, yes, I remember that principle. I studied it during the juniper hour." One elderly archivist near the back adjusts a string of beads as she leans over a scroll. Her incense burns low, almost out. She replaces it with a fresh coil, pinching off the blackened end and muttering, "Let's not forget the calendrical tables again." You get the sense she's been saying that for 30 years. You sit beside a warm brazier and inhale the layers. Sandalwood, acacia, sweet hay, something faintly gingery. It all blurs together into a symphony of structure, a steady breath of information and focus. A bell would be intrusive here. A gong? Absurd. But this? This is elegant. Because here in this quiet chamber, time isn't just passing, it's being written down. With smoke as the guide, with breath as the metronome, and with fragrance soft and sure as the ruler against which each line is drawn. The library fades behind you, its smoky silence lingering on your robes like a polite memory. The sun has started its long descent, casting gold across the corridors as you meander back toward the outer courtyards. It's still warm, but the breeze has picked up, an evening wind just strong enough to tug at your sleeves, and that's when you notice it. A trail of smoldering ash where there should be fragrance. A charred cone, half burned and oddly soggy, sits abandoned on a stone shelf. No smoke rises from it, only a faint, defeated scent of wet bark and disappointment. You've arrived at a moment when smoke failed. It didn't happen often, but when it did, the effects rippled like laughter through the fabric of palace life. A nearby servant chuckles under his breath as he sweeps up the debris. "Storm came through," he says. "Drafts ruined the kitchen sequence. The lentil stew was 15 minutes too thick." He shrugs. "The royal dog wouldn't eat it." You grin. It's comforting somehow to know that even the most delicate systems, like Persia's elegant incense clocks, occasionally went hilariously off course. In fact, entire records exist of fragrance failures, misfires, mislabels, and outright aromatic disasters. One account tells of a poorly sealed storage jar of basil cones that absorbed humidity overnight and burned in 30 seconds flat. A full day's schedule compressed into the time it takes to sneeze. Another tale describes a new apprentice who confused poppy with mustard seed, creating a blend that was both hypnotic and sneeze-inducing. The emperor spent the afternoon both drowsy and inexplicably offended. Historians still argue whether the Persians ever created a backup timekeeping system for these failures. Some say water clocks were kept as emergency stand-ins. Others suggest servants were trained to mimic scents by reciting the names of the incense blends, hoping the association would be enough to jog memory. You imagine a poor steward saying aloud, "Now entering cinnamon hour. Cinnamon, cinnamon," while sweating profusely in front of a skeptical high priest. Then there were the accidental overlaps, when two incense cones burned too close together, merging their scents into something unexpected. A scholar once described this as the lavender clove paradox, a scent so confusing that two advisors missed an entire meeting and spent an hour in the wrong wing. Or the day a monkey, yes, a monkey, stole a small tray of scented cones from the garden and scattered them across the aviary. Time, for several hours, became wildly unpredictable. People took baths in the middle of poetry recitals. A lunch service began during an astronomy lecture. The emperor's parrot repeated juniper, juniper for weeks. But failure wasn't always chaos. Sometimes it was just weather. A windstorm could reverse the smoke trail, sending it into the wrong wing and confusing entire departments. One historian's scroll includes a marginal note: "Governor late due to misdirected rosewood." Sometimes humidity slowed the burn so much that the palace briefly drifted out of rhythm, like an orchestra a few beats behind the conductor. The fix? More tallow, more oil, or simply more patience. But every once in a while, nothing helped. There are letters, hilarious, mildly panicked letters, describing temporal drift when different wings of a palace ended up in different hours of the day. In one, a military clerk insists it's early morning, while the royal seamstress swears it's well past lunch. Both are technically correct. Both are timing their activities by entirely separate scent sequences. No wonder the emperor occasionally just took a nap and waited for consensus. You pass a small side room where an elder sits grinding a new batch of incense paste. He's muttering to himself and frowning at a tray of failed cones, their blackened ends cracking with regret. "Too much sap," he grumbles. "Burns fast, smells like burnt cabbage. No wonder we missed court yesterday." He glances up and adds, not unkindly, "You ever try to recreate frankincense with pine dust and mashed figs? Don't." You smile and sit nearby. Even in their failures, these smoke clocks remain deeply human, imperfect, improvised, funny even, because what they were trying to do, truly, was translate something abstract into something sensory. They weren't building machines, they were building experiences. And sometimes, experiences fall apart, or burn sideways, or get stolen by monkeys, and still. The next morning, the incense is laid out. The threads are trimmed, the air is prepped for time, because that's the thing about scent. It's ephemeral, yes, but it's also forgiving. A mistimed cone is forgotten by sundown. A botched blend makes a good story. And somewhere, always, a new thread is waiting to burn. A servant passes by now, carrying a fresh dish. He lights the new cone, watches it catch, and smiles in satisfaction. The air begins to shift. Juniper, this time, with just a touch of amber. And just like that, time resumes. The corridors are tinged now with gold, the kind of warm, slanted light that announces evening's slow approach. The shadows stretch longer, the footfalls quieter. Even the birds, tucked into carved niches of the palace roofline, sing more slowly. And you feel it. That unmistakable soft hush that says something is ending. The scent in the air has changed again. Softer now, more nostalgic. A little musk, a touch of sweet vetiver, and something that feels like dried petals crumbling between old pages. You've reached the moment when the age of incense timekeeping begins to fade. Not suddenly, not tragically, just quietly, like all beautiful things. You're standing at the threshold of a tiled observatory terrace, once a hub of motion, charts, and evening ritual. But tonight, it's still. No astrologers, no smoke, just a shallow basin of clean water, once used to reflect stars during nighttime scent ceremonies. It mirrors the dusky sky now, cracked only by the ripple of a passing breeze. Below, in the palace city, you notice something odd. A different kind of rhythm. Couriers riding faster, not pausing to breathe the air. Lanterns being lit not after the rose cone, but when the clock tower chimes. Yes, mechanical clocks. Imported, some say, from European courts. Ticking, clicking things with iron cogs and brass weights. Time reduced to numbers, bell tones, and pendulum swings. Accurate? Absolutely. Reliable? Usually. But scented? Evocative? Gentle? No. Historians still argue about when, exactly, the change began. Some blame the arrival of Dutch merchants, bringing pocket watches in exchange for saffron. Others point to a generation of scholars enchanted by gear-driven precision. Others simply note that incense became more expensive, its key ingredients harder to trade for as empires shifted. Whatever the cause, the aromatic clock quietly lost ground. Not because it failed, but because the world grew impatient. Trade routes quickened, battles loomed larger. Governing required sharper minutes, not moods. One court record describes the slow disappearance of smoke time. The vetiver hour now strikes by chime. The jasmine thread is not lit. You walk past an alcove where an old bronze incense holder sits idle. Cold, unused. A light layer of dust coats its edge. A servant passes by and doesn't glance at it. His hands are full, not with threads or cones, but with a paper schedule and a brass bell. You understand, of course. Empires don't pause for poetry, and yet, not everything is gone. You pass through a narrow door into what used to be the scent chamber, a circular room once pulsing with aromatic purpose. It's darker now, less full, but in the corner, a small censer still glows. Someone has lit a single cone. You draw closer. The scent is familiar. Cinnamon, rose, a trace of almond bark. It's not part of any schedule. It's no longer an official hour. But someone still lit it. Out of memory, maybe. Or habit. Or quiet defiance. The smoke rises slowly, unfurling like a forgotten scroll, and for a moment time reverts. You feel it again, the shape of hours not counted in ticks or bells, but in soft breath and sacred burn. You stay in the room for a while, watching the smoke swirl against fading light. A letter left nearby catches your eye. It's written in careful hand, the ink slightly faded. To remember how we once told time by scent is to remember how gently we lived. You run your fingers over the page. You breathe. And when you leave the chamber, the scent clings to your sleeve as if to say, it's not gone, just quieter now. And you believe it. Because even as clocks chime and gears whir, somewhere, maybe in a temple, maybe in a kitchen, someone still lights a cone and waits and watches and breathes. And time once again unfolds like fragrance. You're outside now, under the purpling sky, and the palace behind you seems quieter still, as if it's exhaled and decided to rest. The wind has changed. It carries the cool breath of night, tugging gently at your robes, stirring the tops of the date palms, and lifting the very last curls of incense from the few cones still burning on balconies and garden walls. This is the final hour, not marked by a bell or trumpet, but by a fragrance that says farewell. You find yourself once again in a garden, not the great royal one you passed earlier, but something smaller, tucked near the servants' quarters. It's quieter here, simpler. A low stone bench sits beside a reflecting pool filled with orange petals, their edges browned by the day's heat. A single thread of smoke twists lazily above the water, smelling of dried fig and a whisper of musk. You sit, and time stalls, not stops, just slows, becomes thicker, like warm honey sliding down the curve of a bowl. You know this moment won't last forever, and that's what makes it so perfect. Somewhere nearby, a servant finishes folding linens. A scholar shuts the last cover of a book and exhales. The fire in the kitchen is no longer burning. It's just glowing. The last cone on a brazier by the garden gate has almost vanished, its smoke now too thin to follow. But it's still enough. Because you've learned to tell time not just by clocks, but by the way the world smells when it's ready to sleep. Historians sometimes dismiss these fragrant systems as indulgent, impractical, soft. But you've seen the care, the design, the intelligence behind it. You've walked through its hours and touched its pace. You've tasted time measured in cardamom and almond. You've stood beside sages who burned cedar to greet the moon. And now, here, as the last cone fades, you understand. This wasn't just about keeping track of when to eat or pray or sign royal decrees. It was about the sensation of time itself, making it felt, not feared. Something you live with, not race against. Something intimate. The last bit of cone crumbles into the ash dish. The air holds steady. And then the breeze moves, scattering the scent like a final stanza. You look up. The stars have arrived. A servant passes by, offers a nod, and vanishes through a gate with hinges that don't squeak. The garden is yours now. And as your breath slows and the last warmth of the day pulls back into the stone beneath your feet, you realize you've traveled an entire world where time was never silent. It was scented. A world where jasmine marked devotion, cinnamon marked learning, and sandalwood was the hour to remember your name. And as you let your eyes close, that final scent, rose, soft as dusk, wraps around you like a blanket. Time, for tonight, has told its last story. And you are part of it. Let your breath slow now. The last garden path is behind you. The cones have burned. The coals have cooled. The palace, once busy with scent and ceremony, is asleep. And so are the people, the cooks and scholars, the priests and potters, the young apprentice who tried to time her bread by saffron smoke and ended up with gold-crusted ash. They've all gone quiet. So can you. Let the silence of this vanished world settle around your shoulders. Let it hum like the soft trace of incense on old linen. You're not expected to do anything now. Not think, not remember, not measure your minutes. You've already done all that. You've walked through hours sculpted from spice and breath. You've felt time bend toward comfort, not control. Feel the stone underfoot, the cool air slipping between garden leaves, the sweetness that still lingers, barely, from a cone long since burned. That's all you need. Let your thoughts drift like smoke, unhurried, rising, vanishing into stars. This isn't a time to solve or fix or count. It's a time to rest, to lie still and remember how time once smelled of rose, and that someone, somewhere, lit a cone just to welcome the hour, not to chase it. The clocks can wait. Let this be your jasmine hour. Let it carry you gently into sleep.